Friday. Business Insider has got chart porn. Chart porn. I think there are 71. Business Insider basically sent out requests to all sorts of top economic types and saying, what's your favourite chart of 2012? And they've got the answers in, and I think there's a list of about 70 of them, and they're all on one page, and you can scroll down through all of them. Oh, so it was very hard for me to pick some out to put in this presentation, because it's just I got too excited. Anyway, let's start with this one, which goes back to the year 2000, creation of the euro, among other things. And we've got US real inflation-adjusted GDP growth and Eurozone real GDP adjusted growth. And we can see basically they flow along together for the first 10 or 11 years. But now they have broken apart. And the question is, will they ever get back together again? Probably. The next question is why? And we can imagine that it is because the US government is still largely deficit spending, and the Eurozone governments as a whole are doing austerity. So the Eurozone real GDP growth goes negative, and the US real GDP growth stays at blah blah plus. This one's a bit complicated, but it gives us the picture of what's been going on since the Second World War. Sector cumulative debt and equity issuance to GDP. Basically, let's just call it debt to GDP, and let's start at the bottom, if we may, with the blue kind of dotted line, which is state and local debt, and it's been pretty flat. It was a bit of a kick up in about 2004 for some reason, but basically it's not gone anywhere since 1952. Which line should we take next? The grey line, the grey dotted line, that actually goes to be the highest one at the top right. It actually starts the chart at the bottom, just about the lowest in 1955, let's say, the grey dotted line. Now that's financial debt. So financial companies' financial debt has gone from the lowest in 1955 to well at the highest in the crash time, and has started coming down. The next one up is green, which is the federal government, the green spotted one, federal government, which was just about equal highest at when the chart started in 1952. And it came down to its lowest points in 76 and 82, went up again a bit, across a bit, and now it's gone up since the last bit of the Bush administration and through the Obama administration. And we know from what we've learned, it's compensating for the two that are coming down. And the other one that's coming down is the purple dotted one, which is household. It started in the middle of everything else at 20% and went up to 100%, and now is deleveraged down to 80%. So the financial corporations and households went up the highest. They're starting to deleverage, and to compensate for that, government has gone from below 40 to 70. Different ways of judging that, but as long as they've used the same way of doing it for all of those, then we can roughly understand what the chart is telling us. Let's move on. This is Tom Keane. Put this one up, as I remember. Median real household income. Even if you follow the link and read his writing, I can't quite understand why the yellow circle is there, because it doesn't seem to indicate a total turning point. If we see the little peaks that went above the diagonal red line, there were 3 before it and 1 after it. It doesn't seem to be a significant peak to highlight, but he has for some reason. But what we certainly can say is at the dot-com crash, the turn of the century, turn of the millennium, things did go in a different direction. Median real household income United States going from 42,000 up to 54,000. But since then, in 2000, it's basically come down. It's had a little peak up, not as high as the 2000 peak during the the housing boom, but ever since it's now down to about 50,000. So 54,000 down to 50,000, and that again is real household income median. So it's adjusted for inflation, coming down really for the first time. And the question obviously is, can that get anywhere going again up to the top right corner? It doesn't look like it's heading there. Lawrence Boone put this next one up. I'll call this number 4 because they're all part of this presentation, firing from the Business Insider chart porn list. Like Japan, Lawrence Boone writes, the euro area faces an aging demographic profile, and similar to how Japan has suffered slow growth in recent decades as an aging population weighed on its economy, the euro area may now face similar tough times ahead. Now, I've put this up because the chart doesn't really say much, except Europe's looking a bit like Japan. But I'm sure if you put lots of OECD countries, they'd all look a lot like Japan. But I've put it up to ask the question is, we can accept, I think, that the Eurozone will be lucky if it can run the lost decade and then the second lost decade like Japan has. The Eurozone will be lucky to get away with only Japanification for the next 20 years. The bigger question is, what about the United States? Will the United States be able to get better than Japanification? So let's finish with this chart from Gerard Minack, Head of Global Developed Markets at Morgan Stanley. Deleveraging is difficult. However, the Western world has yet to start the process. The chart shows debt to GDP in the US, Europe and Japan, all added together. So far, in aggregate, the major developed economies have only stopped the process of leveraging up. There has not been a material reduction in debt relative to GDP. All we have seen is debt swapped from the private to the public sectors. That averted depression, but has not solved the debt problem. And that's where I'm going to leave it today. Debt to GDP for Japan, US and Europe. We can see it coming. This is just the end of it, but you know before this chart it was always on the up and up, and it looks like it's hit a top limit and is now flattened off like the oil plateau. And the question is, well, will it get going again upwards? And that's just highly unlikely, isn't it, that it will get going again upwards. So we ask ourselves, well, what would the powers that be want to happen? We've learnt that household debt is the main culprit in this, and as the Morgan Stanley boy says, the debt is being swapped from private to public, so now government debt is going up. But what do we want? Do we want that line to go up, the deleveraging to happen, and then get down? Let's just use numbers. Say it went up to 100. Do we want it to get down to 500 and then go back up to 100 again? My brain, the mystic brain, says it doesn't matter what we want. That sort of thing does not happen. If it goes up to 100 on debt, because we're talking people, it won't go down to 50 and back up to 100 again. It'll go down to 50 and probably stay there for 2 or 3 generations. It won't just go, oh, let's go down to a reasonable amount, now we can take debt on again and go again. It just will not happen that way. It will go down and stay down, which will be a whole new paradigm, a whole new paradigm. Anyway, that one is that deleveraging has not started yet. It has gone flat, but it has not gone down. 70 chart porn charts. Follow the link. Bye.